Okay. Well, everyone, welcome. I'm so happy that you could join us today. I'm Sandy Elliott. I'm the English Learner Support Specialist for the Department of Education, and today I have with me Melissa Banks, our great friend and colleague, who is our Instructional Technology Specialist, and she is going to give you some great resources this afternoon. We are recording this session, and it will be available for those who are unable to attend at this time and for you to review any parts that you may want to see again. So on the next slide, we show our vision and our mission, which is our vision is to create a world-class education system that gives students the knowledge and skills to be successful in college and the workforce, and to flourish as parents and citizens. And our mission is to provide leadership through the development of policy and accountability systems so that all students are prepared to compete in the global community. On the next slide, you'll see our 6 State Board of Education goals. And I'm not going to read through all of them. I'm sure you've seen them before, but you'll notice that they talk about all students and every teacher, every child, every community, every school, and every district. So those ideas of being very inclusive of everyone, that's what drives our work at the department. So we're really happy to be here with you today to share some information to meet your needs. So just a couple of session norms. Some of you may be new to Microsoft Teams, so I wanted to go ahead and share some information here. So there's a lovely picture of me, and you can see that I've just noted some things on the platform that will be helpful for you. So you'll see the little box that looks like a speech bubble, and that's to open the chat box so that you can put questions in or check other links. We will be adding links throughout the presentation that will be helpful for you. The little hand, it raises your hand. So if you want to ask a question, that will alert us to pause so that you can ask your question. Also, there's, of course, the microphone to turn your microphone on and off, and we ask everyone to please mute your microphone. There's always lots of noise, especially when we're in school, that we cannot control. So if we can keep that muted, that'll help with everyone. And then I have a red arrow showing to the little button that looks like a television with an upload button. You don't want to click that button, because if you click that button, then Melissa's screen stops sharing, and then we'll start seeing your screen. So please just be really careful of that button. And then finally, the chat. To add a comment into the chat, you simply type in the bar at the bottom on the right, and then you click the little airplane to add your comment. Then on the next slide, oh, Melissa's going to show us something great. You're going to like this.
Yeah, so I just real quickly before we get much further, I wanted to show you a little trick that is available in Microsoft PowerPoint 365. Now, if you don't know whether or not you have that, we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, but it is an option that allows you to add subtitles to your presentations. And the great thing about it, though, is that you can choose the language of the titles. I'm going to escape real quick out of full screen mode here. Well, I'm going to try to. There we go. And I want to show you what this looks like in PowerPoint. So, Sandy, can you still see my PowerPoint screen?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. All right, so when you're in PowerPoint, if you're in the slideshow part of the ribbon, you have an option right here for your subtitle settings. And so when I click on those, I can choose the spoken language to be English. That's what we're all speaking most likely. And then I can also choose the subtitle language, and the subtitle language can be different, or you can leave the subtitle language in English if you want to. That could still be helpful for your EL students. So right now, my subtitle settings are set to Spanish. So at this point, if I were to play my slideshow again. If you notice in the bottom corner, I have some icons. And this is the back button and edit, and this little computer. This is the one that's going to turn on the subtitles. So I'm going to click that. And you'll notice that now, as I start speaking, it's going to put subtitles below in Spanish. Now, I do not know Spanish, so I really have no idea how accurate it is, but Sandy knows Spanish, and she assures me that it's actually pretty good. One thing that you'll notice is that as I am speaking, it's kind of constantly going back and correcting the grammar or maybe the word choice to try to make it as accurate as possible. So this could be a really, really valuable tool for you to use with your English language students, or even maybe with parents. So if you're having a parent night or a parent conference or something like that, this could be something that you could include to make sure that everyone is understanding the communication that you're trying to send out. What we're going to do for now, I'm going to go ahead and turn them off so that we can continue on with our presentation. But I do want to kind of give you a little heads up. In order to have the subtitles running, you do have to have an internet connection because it's constantly pulling down that translation service. So it does require an internet connection. All right, so I hope you guys like that, and we'll share some more tech tools in just a few minutes. To make them stop, you simply hover back over that little computer icon and you click it again. And then this is just, this slide just tells you a little bit more in depth what I did. So we went to that slideshow button and looked at those subtitle settings.
Great. I love that tool because I really think it's so helpful with students and with parents, especially when we're trying to communicate with parents. That's a great tool. And even in English, it really is very helpful, as she said. So today, we are going to go through best practices for supporting English learners. And actually, we're going to switch the order up a little bit, and we're going to go through some technology supports. And then at the end, we'll go through some accommodations and modifications that will support your English learners. Okay, so on the first slide, the next slide, sorry, not the first slide, the next slide. I'd like to show this information about really the trend of our English learner growth in Mississippi. So you'll see this is for 5 years, and actually it's up to 2017. So we've grown even more since then. So in less than 10 years, though, really in about 5 or 6 years, we have grown more than 1,000% in the number of English learners we have in the state. So that's a significant jump. But when you look at figure 2, you'll see that not only have we grown in the number of English learner students, but also we have a lot more languages than previously. So you'll see here that this really shows that this shows our top 5 languages, but we have well over 60 languages in the state of Mississippi, and that continues to grow every day. So many times I get emails and phone calls from schools and districts that say, we have a new student, no one else in our school speaks this language as this student. So we're really growing a lot, and these strategies that we're going to go over today, I think, are going to be very beneficial for you for all your English learners, no matter what language they speak. Okay, then on the next slide, I love to show this slide because this is really about the growth of English learners. So this is just from 1 year to the next, and that's showing the number of ELs tested. You can see that there's a significant number higher from 2018 to 2019, but also look at the difference in the number of ELs who exited. And this is a statistically significant number. Percentage increase, but also what I really like about this is that background information that all of us really need to have is that this growth is due to the work that teachers are doing with students. This is about what you're doing with kids. We have had really a tremendous growth in the interest from teachers on how do I work with my EL students, from all the way from teachers who are ESL teachers to teachers who are gen ed teachers or special ed teachers who've never worked with EL kids before. And they want to know, what can I do to help these students? And a lot of it also has to do with collaboration between EL teachers and gen ed teachers or special ed teachers. We also have many schools where there is no ESL teacher in the building or even in the district. So it's even harder for teachers, but that growth is happening in general ed classrooms with our English learner students, and that's due to, I think that's due to the work that teachers are doing. So thank you all so much, and we're hoping that today this information will help you even more. Okay, so let's get right into talking about best practices for supporting ELs, and we're going to go through it, talking about it from the traditional standpoint and also from the distance learning standpoint, because I know y'all are distance learning, but our goal is that one day soon we will be back to a traditional classroom. So one of the most important things we can do is to make things visual for our kids. We can do things like using a visual schedule, and the one that you see here on the right, that is actually on our EL webpage. And on that webpage, we have this document. It's a Word document. You can download it. You can add your own times, your own pictures. If you have one, you can have one in your classroom for what your general classroom schedule is. So say you're science teacher and the students come in, they have bell work, and then there's a brief lecture time from you as the teacher, and then there's lab time. So they would need to get with their partners, things like that. And then at the end, the cleanup time and the post-discussion. So that might be something that's on your visual schedule. You may have a visual schedule, and when I say visual schedule, you would have pictures to go with that. So if you've got a bell ringer assignment, you'd have a picture of, a paper assignment, or if it's in their science journal, wherever it is, that's what you'll want to make sure you have a picture of on there. You could also have, when it's partner time, you could have a picture of two students working together. When it's lab time, you could have a tool for that. So you want the pictures to be meaningful so that the students understand what's coming next. This visual schedule could also be done individually for students for their daily schedule. And maybe they have algebra first. They're going to have, you'll have that time, you'll have the name of the class, maybe the room number, maybe the teacher's name, maybe put a picture of the teacher there so they remember who they're looking for. You could have, since it's algebra, you could have a picture related to algebra. Maybe even if they have a particular buddy or peer partner that they're working with during that class, you can have that in there. So if you can, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna, thank you. Okay, so if you can make that meaningful with the visuals, that's what's really important. Also, visual anchor charts, visual word walls. So here I have a math content specific visual word wall that was created on Padlet. So on it I have, and I can go in alphabetical order. What I love about Padlet is that it's easy to use. I'm not the most tech savvy person, but it's simple to use, and you can add to it and change the order of things. But for example, here we have bar graph, and then we have pictures of different bar graphs. We have the word distance and then a picture to go with it. So remember, we want the meaning to match the words so that it's comprehensible for the students. Now, I know y'all are probably looking at those classroom labels, and you're thinking, no, we're not doing that because our kids are older. They don't need that anymore. I'm with you that I thought the same thing. When I did not teach high school, but I taught everything from 2nd to 7th. And when I taught my little kids, second, third grade, I was all about those classroom labels. I thought they were great. I used them all the time. Once I moved up to those upper elementary and sixth, seventh grade, I thought, we don't need these anymore. They know how to use the dictionary. I'm not putting these up anymore. Well, actually, one of my last years in the classroom, the ESL teacher came to me. This was beginning of the school year. She came to me and said, Sandy, I've got about 5 EL kids in your class that I'm putting in your class this year. And 2 of them are newcomers. And I was like, okay, great. What are their names? And, I'm continuing to set up my classroom. And she says, this would be a great year for you to bring back your classroom labels. And I said, yeah, okay. And because she was my friend and she knew me well, she
there it is. Thank you.
put up things for the students to mute themselves. That would be really helpful. Thank you. So she left my room, and then she came back a few minutes later and she said, here, I've got a present for you. And she had a brand new pack of classroom labels. So I put them up and I just thought, well, this will be great. We'll just go ahead and I'll put it up. It'll be fine. It's going to be something I have to keep up with. I'm not really happy about that, but I'll do it. So I had a group of sixth graders who, sixth grade, they don't buy into much, but they did buy into this when I asked them to do this. I told them, there was a particularly nice group of kids, I will admit that. I said, we've got 2 kids in our class who are brand new to learning English, and they're going to need as much of our help as possible. And so they would do things like say, hey, Miss Elliott, we don't have a label for the new science journals, or can I make a label for that new computer printer, or whatever we had that we needed. And they would work together too. One person had good handwriting and the other person was good at drawing. They would do that, or they would find a picture and print it. So it became a community activity, and it was definitely not something that I needed to keep up with, but I found that all my students were really using it as well. There are plenty of times when you forget how to spell a word or you can't think of the word, but I would see all kinds of kids and all levels of kids looking up and using those labels throughout the room. So again, all of these things that we're going to share with you today, these are things that are going to benefit English learners for sure, but they're also going to benefit all your other students. So this is not something you're doing just for your English learners. It's going to support all your students who are struggling, and even those who might not always struggle. Okay, so on the next slide, just making it distance friendly, we want to make sure we're still using those pictures or videos on virtual presentations. This was a Jamboard, this picture here. So I have the new word, I have its meaning, and then I have the translation. So say I'm teaching Romeo and Juliet, and this time I'm talking about a play on a stage. So I need to make sure that my students understand it. I've got pictures to go with it. I've got the word in the language that my students may understand, and also the English meaning, so that I can make sure I'm always making that comprehensible for them. If you have students who are who don't have access all the time, I know how that is. Sometimes we may have students who don't have access at all to the internet, or students who don't have or have kind of inconsistent internet access. We can send these pictures home via printed packets. And we also want to do one more thing just to make our classroom friendly with visuals. Put a class schedule, post that in the chat prior to the beginning of class, and you can just get little icons or pictures to go with each part. So say you're going to start with, we're going to start with bell work, then we're going to have teacher lecture time, then you're going to do group work, and then we're going to come back together and have class discussion. Maybe that's the way my class routine goes every day. Then I want to make sure that I have that in there. That's just going to cut down on frustration for all kids to know what's coming next, and to help English learners especially to feel less frustrated with not knowing, oh, what am I supposed to be doing right now? Okay, then on the next slide, just some additional best practices. So we want to make sure that we are moderating our speech for fluency, clarity, and enunciation, especially when we're talking through devices like telephones or computers. A lot of times our devices cut off at really crucial times, so we really need to make sure that we're repeating as needed. I know a lot of times when I'm speaking with adults via the internet, I'll just keep going. There may have been some distortion, and I just keep going because they're adults, and I figure they're going to understand what I'm saying or pick up on what was lost. But for students, we need to make sure that we are going back and reiterating that information and really making sure they heard it all and clarifying if there's any confusion. Also, when we're giving directions, specific directions for, say, completing an assignment or what we want a certain discussion to be about, go ahead and put those written directions in the chat bar. Because a lot of times if we go into breakout rooms, kids are forgetting, what were we supposed to be talking about? I mean, I've done that myself during a webinar. What were we supposed to cover? So I'll look in the chat bar, and that'll be in there for me to know, oh, okay, this is what we're circling our discussion. Also, allowing for longer wait times. That's a fantastic practice, whether in a traditional classroom or online. And I know a lot of times we are, as teachers, we're thinking, I've got to get through this, this, and this today because I need to be on schedule. And that's great, yes, but I promise that allowing just a little bit longer wait time to allow everyone to participate will make a great difference in the long run for who's getting it and who's participating in your class. So if you think about a native English speaker, they hear a question, think of a response, and then they're ready to answer. Pretty quick. Now, an English learner hears your question, selects vocabulary from that question that they understand, translates that back to their native language, then thinks of a response, translates that back into English, and now they're ready to answer. So they just need more time to think so that they can participate. The next slide. Okay, another best practice is to allow students to write out answers before speaking. And again, it takes a little bit of time. Don't give them too much time. Give them about 20 seconds, 15, 20 seconds to write down a few words of what they want to say to respond to a question. I will tell you that I started doing this not just for my English learners, but for my students with dyslexia, because the dyslexia therapist told me, well, he's got a processing issue, so it's going to take him a little bit longer. The information is back there. He's just kind of got to bring it forward, and it's going to take him a little bit longer. So I said, okay. So I just took a few seconds, and I'd say, okay, I want you to write down what you want to tell me in a few words. You got 15 seconds. Not long, because they'll get off topic, you know, and then you have to bring them back. So when I did that, what I found was not only was I getting more of my shy students and my English learners to respond, but I was also getting deeper, more thoughtful answers from those smarty pants kids who knew the answers right away. And they also, because you know, the smarty pants kids, they'd say to me, Miss Elliott, I know the answer. I don't need to write it down. And I'd say, okay, that's all right. You don't have to write it down. But I found that they became more patient, and while they were waiting, they thought of something else they wanted to say with what they were going to say. So it really was a benefit for everyone. So this idea about refraining from allowing shout outs when you're in the whole group or small group, that's just going to help clarify if we go one at a time who's speaking, because English learners, they're listening to everything very carefully, and they may hear two students say the same answer, but those two students say it in a slightly different way. And if we as teachers say, yeah, you're absolutely right, you're both right, and then we move on, our English learners may be sitting back there saying, wait a minute, they said two things, two different things. How do I know what's right? So that'll just help clarify. And I know there are times when kids get engaged and they're all participating and they're all calling out answers. And that's great. We actually love that they're that engaged. But what we can do is we can make sure that we as the teacher are the ones to repeat what other students are saying. That's just going to clarify, especially in a digital format, what's the important information that we want our students to hear. Okay, on the next slide, writing down key terms and using visuals, that's really, we can display those on screens, in chat boxes, via text if we're having a phone conversation, or on paper, or we can provide that information on, say, a Google Doc or something to help us to have that written down. And when we do that, we want to make sure we use the exact words that the students are going to be using. That's just going to cut down on confusion with similar sounding words, especially for English learners, because a lot of times I just think about a lot of those science words. I think about like meiosis and mitosis. They sound very similar at the end, but an English learner has got to listen very carefully to the whole thing. So we want to provide them with the whole word so that they know exactly how is that word different? Am I saying two different words? And also just continuing to use scaffolding techniques like graphic organizers, emailing notes ahead of time or even after, utilizing virtual partners. And those virtual partners don't necessarily have to be partners who speak the same language. They may be somebody who is just really tech savvy or is really one of those kind-hearted kids who, you know, they'll be a helper too. So let's utilize our students to help with supporting all of our other students. Then on the next slide, this is a really big one. We really want to make sure we're incorporating conversation into all aspects of our teaching. In a traditional classroom, we can do it through 30-second conversations. We can do it through scheduled turn and talk opportunities, through think, pair, share. And it's really important that we get our kids to talk. They've got to have that opportunity to practice language. If we don't practice a language that we're learning, we're not going to get better at it. On the next slide, we take this to the digital level, and we just see a couple of things. Oh, well, actually we don't. We talk about just remembering that building those opportunities for students to interact, either in breakout rooms, by allowing them to post messages in the chat, or on a shared Google Doc, or through video responses. This is really important and valuable time for our students to practice those English language skills and to share their thinking. Because a lot of times English learners, if you ask them, do you understand? They'll smile and shake their head very nicely. But we've got to hear from them to know what they're thinking. Otherwise, we don't know if there are any misconceptions that we need to clarify for them. Then on the next slide, now we talk about how to make it distance friendly. I just want you to think too that because of COVID and the restrictions that it has created for all of us, our EL students may have fewer opportunities to practice their English skills. So that's really important that in our classroom we provide those opportunities. They might not be participating in sports or church activities or group, club activities that they're used to participating in because of the restrictions from COVID. So just on our digital platform, we want to do group work or partner work that can support oral language development. You can have, this can be done virtually or over the phone. Maybe you might have a homework assignment that's, students are going to talk to each other via the phone. Maybe you're going to set up a time. Consider scheduling some call times just to check in with your individual students, and then that gives your EL students an opportunity to practice English language skills. And those newcomers, at first, it's going to be very limited. They may say yes, no. So and that can be done virtually through the computer if they have access, or it can be done over the phone. Okay, then on the next slide, think about your structured learning environment. You want to decide which digital tools you want students to use regularly. We don't want to do too many at once. That can be hard on students. And then decide on a structure for your daily lessons. That's really important that there's a regular routine for it for your students. Okay, the next slide. Just setting up your classroom, and I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. And we'll apply it to a digital classroom as well. So we want to make our classroom visually welcoming by posting pictures and posters that reflect their culture and their team. So we want to label items in all languages if possible. And also, so you see there's a sign for a restroom there. And that was actually in one of our Mississippi schools, and somebody took a picture of it and sent it to me, so I thought that was great. So those were the languages, all the languages that were in that school. And also provide those if students read that language. We do have some students who don't read in their first language, so that's really an important factor. It's not going to be beneficial if they don't read that language. Okay, on the next slide. So on your digital classroom, again, you want to use when you're creating your PowerPoints or things that you're going to be teaching about, you want to make sure you're going to use pictures and posters that, again, reflect their culture and their heritage. And also label the items on the platform. So there's, again, that lovely picture of me. But remember, again, so I labeled the things on the platform. I put in, we're going to open the chat box. That's what that little box shows. And notice that I put it on this one, I put it not only in English, but I also put it in Spanish. So again, for your students who read in that language, that's going to be beneficial. Okay, on the next slide. Okay, so again, those meaningful visuals, same thing on the virtual platform, and I just have that in there really for the slide deck so you can refer back to it, but it's the same idea. So the one thing that's new in there is that the classroom labels, and those you can make very specific to things that you use in your class. So if they use a pencil, a journal, their computer, different items regularly in your classroom, that's a great place to make sure you make one of those up, send it to them, they can print it, or you can print it and mail it to them, or if there's a pickup and drop off time for items, provide that for them so that they'll know what you're talking about when you say, go ahead and take out a piece of paper. They know what that is. They've got a communication card to help them remember that. Okay, next slide. And that just again goes into the meaningful visuals. So just another reminder for you. And on the next slide. So another thing that we really want to make sure that we do is we provide multicultural books that reflect the main characters from different cultures and languages. And also we want to have them there because they are a mirror for our students from different cultures so that they see themselves in these situations and in books, but also they serve as a window for our other students to learn about different cultures. And then really, just as importantly, especially at the high school level, is to have those high interest and low readability books for those students who are struggling, to get them engaged in reading. And there really are a good number of them out there for students. On the next slide, I've got links to multiple locations to find free digital multicultural books. And I know some of them say that they're for libraries, but they have a large age range in those. So you'll want to check those out to find some free books. And that last one, number 4, is a really good one for a lot of resources, learning at home resources. And we really tried to get several book links on that site. So just some other practices that can help support students is to learn the correct pronunciation of their name. That's really important. It makes them feel like you're going to take the effort to learn something, and you know that their individuality is important. And I'll tell you that I know that, like, it's not always easy to learn it. And I remember having some students from Vietnam who their names were very difficult to pronounce for me. So they would tell me, and they would, I'd try and say it, and they'd teach me again and again. It would sometimes take several times. And finally, about the 4th or 5th time, I'd get it, and they'd be laughing at me, and I'd laugh at myself, and that was okay. But I was getting it. And then the next day I would try it again, and it would take me a while to get it. But I think they really appreciated the fact that I was trying to learn a new language too, and they were trying to learn a new language. So I think they saw that it's okay to struggle, and it's okay to laugh at yourself when you make a mistake. You're going to make a mistake. You're trying to learn it. With English learners, we always want to make sure that we're checking back with them and offering that one-on-one assistance. Again, we've said it before, they're going to smile and shake their head when you ask them how's it going, and you may not really see that they're struggling. So you've got to check back with them, because they may not really tell you that they're struggling. Assigning that peer partner and using an interpreter or interpreting devices, and Melissa's going to show you a couple of those, just to especially get over that hurdle with those newcomers to help make things comprehensible, to help them feel more comfortable. Okay, on the next slide. Again, inviting their culture into the classroom. We can do it through music, we can do it through visuals, we can do it through books and characters in books. We also want to make sure that our ELs are involved in cooperative learning, and that they are included in a non-threatening manner. So we take them where they are at their level. So if they're struggling with language and they're new and they're not yet ready to have a big part in, say, a reader's theater skit, we give them the smaller part. Or we might give them, if we're doing just a skit in general, we might give them a non-speaking part. But we make sure we involve them at the level that they can be involved in. Because you're going to have some EL kids who their language acquisition is coming along fine, and they're further along. Maybe they've been here 2-3 years. Make sure we get them involved, and don't just say, well, they can't do it because they're English learners, they don't understand the language, or they can't speak it. We've got to find a way to include them. And again, helping them to follow the established rules. If we're all doing writing, we want all our English learners to do writing, even if their writing skills are not up to the same level as the other students yet. Okay. In a traditional classroom, we want our EL students seated in close proximity to the main instructional areas or near a peer buddy, or where we can access them easily. We want to make sure that they have their cameras on, so that we can see. A lot of times we can tell a whole lot by their facial expressions about whether or not they're attending to the lesson, whether or not they're participating, whether or not they're getting it. They may be confused and they might have that look on their face, so we need to know that. Okay, next slide. Okay, now Melissa's going to talk to you about tech tools a bit.
All right, yeah, so I'm going to just walk you through a few tech tools that we think would be very beneficial to use with your students. But before we jump into that, there we go. Just a really quick disclaimer. We give this before we do any kind of technology presentation. Any tools that I share with you today, please go back before you use them in your classroom. Get the approval of your administrators, get the approval of your technology staff at the district office. And then it's always a really, really, really your parents are aware of the technology tools that the students are using while they're in your classroom. Okay, so I'm going to go over a few things that you can use to help with reading supports for your EL students. And I highly encourage, especially at the secondary level, these are tools that you need to teach your students how to use independently so that when they're working independently or when they're maybe trying to read through the textbook or when they're trying to read through different things, that they have the skill and ability to help themselves, to have those classroom accommodations that they can do. And it's not something you have to sit down and do for them. So really want to stress, especially like I said, at that secondary level, teach your students how to utilize these tools. All right, so the first tool we're going to talk about is a tool called Immersive Reader, and it's actually part of the Microsoft Office 365 package, if you will. We used earlier when I was talking about Microsoft PowerPoint, remember I said it was PowerPoint 365, and I'd talk a little more about that later. So here we go. It gets a little bit confusing, so I want to make sure we're very clear. If I remember correctly, you guys in Vicksburg, Warren are actually Google, you're a Google school. So you are fully utilizing the G Suite, you're using Google Docs, Google Slides, and all those great things. I don't know if anyone is using Microsoft Word there, but what I want to let you know is a little while ago, Microsoft kind of came out with their answer to the Google Suite, and their answer is the Microsoft Office 365 Online. So they have all of the products that most of us are familiar with: Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. All of them are available in a cloud-based form. So again, just like your Google tools, they're available in the same way. So you access them through the internet. There is real-time, one-on-one collaboration that students can have, or that you can have with students. And the great thing is these tools, these online tools, are available for free to students and teachers when you sign up for a Microsoft Education account. So let me go ahead and say that again. The online web application Microsoft 365 tools are free with a student or teacher email address. The desktop versions are not free, okay? You still have to pay for those just like you normally think of them. But we're not talking about those today. We're going to talk about what we can do in the free online application. So when I was in PowerPoint a while ago and doing those subtitle slide translations, you can access that in the free version of Microsoft PowerPoint. Immersive Reader, which is what we're about to talk about now, you can access in the free version of Word, Microsoft Word Online, or Microsoft Word 365. Okay, we're going to quit talking about that and just jump into Immersive Reader. If you have any questions on what you can get, what's free, what's not free, how do I sign up, please put those in the chat box. Sandy's going to be watching and we can get those questions answered. So what exactly is Immersive Reader? Well, Immersive Reader is really like text-to-speech, but on steroids, okay? You can do so much with it, and we can train our students to utilize it in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to switch real quick from my PowerPoint, and I'm going to go to just my regular internet screen here. All right, so this is the Microsoft Word 365 online user interface, okay? So this is what it looks like. This is what the online version looks like. I have a new document here that I have just pasted some text into that we are going to use the Immersive Reader just so you can see what it does. So in the view ribbon right here, there is a button at the top called Immersive Reader, and that's what we're going to open up. So I'm going to click it, and I want you to watch and see what happens. Okay, so everything kind of changed. So we left, you can think of it as we kind of left Microsoft Word. All of my Microsoft Word functions are gone. It's just me and the text. So it's taken everything else away. Now up here at the top right, these three buttons, these are your tools. This is where all the power is. So I'm going to click on this little double A right here. These are our text preferences. So when we think about these things, these are the kind of things we think about when we think about accessibility features. So do I have students with visual impairments? Do I have students with dyslexia who maybe need a particular font or a particular text size or particular spacing? Okay, that's what all of this is. So I can increase the text size. Okay. I can also choose to turn on or off the spacing. Okay, so that is the increased spacing off, and this is with the increased spacing on. So you'll notice it spaces out the lines, and it also spaces out the individual letters, which can be helpful for some of our students. I can change the font, and I can change the color contrast. So again, if I have, excuse me, students with some visual impairments, or, they just prefer it that way, they can make those adjustments if they want to. So that is the text preferences. This next button right here, these are our grammar options. And I love this because you notice it has a magic wand. So here's where I'm going to do some magic. So I'm going to open up my grammar options, and you'll notice that from my last demonstration, I actually still have the syllable separation on. So I can turn that off. Okay, there's just the text, or I can choose to turn those syllables on. So if that helps your students, they can turn that on or off. It's totally up to them. Let me go back real quick. I'm going to take that blue screen off. There we go. The other thing I can do here in the grammar section is I can choose to label the different parts of speech. So I can turn the nouns on, I can turn on verbs, adjectives, and then I could even change these colors. So if I don't like those highlight colors, I can change that. I can also, at the very bottom, I can choose to turn on the labels. So if I want it to label like verb, adjective, noun, I can do that. To me, that's getting a little bit too much for me visually, but if that's helpful for you or for your students, you have that ability. Now, this last button right here, these are the reading preferences, and this is the real powerhouse, I think, of Immersive Reader. And this is what I really, really, really think would be so valuable for your students to learn how to use on their own. So I can turn on reading preferences, or I can go to my reading preferences, and I have several options here. So the first thing that I have is line focus, and I can choose to turn this on and off. So line focus does just what you think it will. So it will focus in on just one particular line, and then I can go through there like that. Again, just helps me really hone in and focus on a little bit at a time, maybe versus being quite so overwhelmed. I can choose to do 3 lines at a time. And then the last option, which is actually grayed out because we really only have one paragraph of text, is that you can choose to focus on just one paragraph of text at a time. All right, I'm going to turn that off for the time being. The next thing that we have here is the picture dictionary option. And so this is currently turned on. And you'll notice right here, really tiny, this is in partnership with Boardmaker. So I don't know if any of you guys are, work closely with your special education department. Many special education departments utilize Boardmaker. And it's really just a set of images that are pulled to help give meaning to words. But the great thing is that if they're getting that exposure in their special ed classroom and then they use Immersive Reader, they're going to be seeing the same images for the same words. So that's really, really helpful. So if I turn on, or it is on, so what I do to activate it is I just click on a word. So see, I click on sports right here. I have a great image to help me. And then notice it will even say the word forwards. Okay. One thing I do want to point out is that not every word has a picture associated with it. So between, you'll notice that doesn't have a picture associated with it. Fun does. Okay, so it just kind of depends. Again, that all goes back to what is in that board maker package. The next thing, this is the powerful tool for our English learners. We have a translation option. So I can choose the language that I want to translate to. I'm just going to leave it on Spanish for our demo here. And then this is what I can choose. So I can choose to translate by word, or I can choose to translate the entire document. Now, we know with our English learners, we really want to immerse them in the English language. So I would highly recommend just translating word by word. So if they're really struggling with a particular word, they can get that translation, but we want to expose them to as much English as possible. Or if they're a newcomer and they need that whole thing translated, go ahead and translate that whole document. But right now I'm going to click by word. And then what I do is I just simply, again, click on a word that I need more information about. Notice it gives me the word in English. It gives me the word in Spanish, and I can listen to it. Deportes. And then I also have the image. So I have all of those things built in right there in the Immersive Reader platform to help me as I am going through and trying to read this particular text. Again, I can choose to do the whole document if I want to. Okay. And then last but not least, it will, you notice down here at the bottom, you have a little play button. It will actually read the entire passage out loud for them.
Cross the line between fun and danger. Bungee jumpers drop from great heights.
Okay, and I love that it highlights the word that it's currently speaking so that they can follow along. And then down here at the bottom, you've got some settings. So if you want to change the speed or whether it's a male or female voice, they have the option to change that as well. All right, so put in the chat box. I want to hear, what do you think about Immersive Reader? Do you think this is a tool that you could train your students to use and would really help them in the classroom? So I want you to think about that. Now, I will say that, and I'm going to hit this little back arrow to go back to Microsoft Word. To me, the biggest downfall of Immersive Reader is that it's really only available to me here in Microsoft Word. Well, what about other ways that I may want to use it? So I would have to get the text into Microsoft Word and then utilize the Immersive Reader feature. Well, I'm going to actually do a little app smashing with you today, and I'm going to pair this with a tool called Wakelet. Now, I'm not going to go through creating a Wakelet collection. I'll tell you a little bit about Wakelet, though. It is a completely free tool. You can access it via the web like I'm doing right now, or if you have tablets, it's available for Android and iOS. So whatever device you have, whether you've got Chromebooks, MacBooks, or tablets, you guys can access Wakelet. And essentially, it is just a place for you to be able to make collections of information. So there's all kinds of things you can put in a Wakelet. You can put text, you can put videos, you can put images, you can upload PDFs, you can put web links, you can link it to your Google Drive and input files from your Google Drive. All kinds of things you can do, and it just collects it in this one place and makes it nice and organized and really visually appealing, and kind of helps take away some of that clutter that can sometimes happen when we're trying to share lots of information with our students. So here's a Wakelet. Let's say that I've created this for my students and I want to share it with them. Now, this is a demonstration that would probably be more appropriate as far as the content for elementary, but I think you guys will be able to easily make that transition to secondary. So the idea behind this Wakelet is that I want to help my students with some of that academic vocabulary. So we're working on the life cycle of a butterfly, and I want to help not only my EL students, but all of my students with some of that vocabulary. So I've made a collection. There's got a great image of a butterfly here. The first thing in my collection is a quick YouTube video that they can watch the life cycle of a butterfly. But here's the real power, right? So here's my vocabulary. And we're going to start going through it. So I've got this great visual of an egg. We know that this is how important those visuals are, especially for our EL students. So I've got a great visual here. And then I have the word and the, now here's the power that I was talking to you about. This is some of that app smashing that's about to happen. Notice right here, this little icon with the open book and speaker, that's the Immersive Reader icon. And this happens automatically in Wakelet. So if you enter text into your Wakelet, it is going to automatically link it to Immersive Reader. So when the student clicks on this, notice that the Immersive Reader kind of platform opens up. And so now all of those tools that I showed you just a minute ago, they have access to them right here. So if they need some translation for butterfly, I have it in English,
mariposa,
I have it in Spanish, and I have yet another visual. So all of those things are right there for me. I can hit the back button and I go immediately back to my Wakelet. Another great thing about Wakelet, and I'm going to kind of skim down to the bottom. So this is a website that I've put into my Wakelet. It's just a web link that I pasted in there. Maybe I want them to go here, read a little bit more, get some more information. This is a link to actually a National Geographic Kids site. So they could click on it and open it up, but they may have some difficulty reading it. But if you'll notice, as I hover over my web link right here, there's this little paper icon, and it's called Read Mode. So I'm going to click on that, and I want you to see what happens. All right, so here's my website. Notice what's not there. You don't have all those ads. You don't have distracting videos playing. You don't have images. It's just the text. All those distractions have gone away. Okay, I just have the text, so I can really focus in on this text. And then look up here at the top. What's that? Immersive Reader. Woo! So I'm going to click on Immersive Reader, and here we go. So now I have this text from a website that my students are able to utilize Immersive Reader and be able to access that information. Isn't that cool? That's pretty amazing. It's pretty cool. I'm going to hit the back arrow. And then just if you want to, the students can always choose to visit the original site so they can open it up and see the actual site. Because again, it does, like I said, it takes out all those distractions. So there may be some images and things that would be helpful that they would want to see and view on their own. Okay, so that's a little app smashing. That's Wakelet, completely free. Immersive Reader, free with the Microsoft 365 education account. All right, now let's see what else I got for you. Okay, next thing that I wanted to, I do want to show you this real quick. Sandy, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yeah, no, we see Wakelet
No.
still.
Okay, sorry. Let me change this real quick. There we go. Now do you see the PowerPoint again?
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing I do want to show you, you can very easily share your Wakelet with your students. So I'm not sure if you guys are using Google Classroom at the secondary level for an LMS, or if you're using Google Classroom, period, for an LMS, but you can immediately share it to your Google Classroom, or you can simply copy that web link right there and you can paste it into whatever LMS you guys are using. So it's just an easy way for you to provide that access for your students. It will also generate a QR code if you would like to use that option as well. All right.
And Melissa, I have, for those who don't have their chat open, I did put the links that Melissa has provided for both Microsoft 365 and for Wakelet.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so real quick, we're going to go over some video and audio responses, some different ways that you can have students respond. And maybe it's not, like Sandy said earlier, maybe we want them to participate in the writing process, but maybe they're not fully there yet. So we have them participate as they can in the writing process, but then we give them an option to also supplement and tell us what they know, because sometimes it's easier for them to tell us versus writing. That writing, Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong, that writing is that last part for EL students, right? That's the hardest part for them to.
Correct. That's usually the last skill to come up to meet their speaking and their listening and their reading levels.
Yes. So these are some ways you can allow for some accommodations so that you can really find out what your students know. One of those ways we're going to talk about is Flipgrid. Now, if you may be familiar with Flipgrid, but if you haven't visited it in a while, they have really made some big changes to Flipgrid. So I want to take you there. I don't think we're going to have time to participate in our own Flipgrid, but that's okay. I want to show you what it looks like for your students. So in case you're not aware, Flipgrid, again, completely free tool. It allows students to record a video response. It can be a 15-second video all the way up to a 10-minute video. 10 minutes is a long time for a student to talk to you. So you have a lot of flexibility there. It is available for iOS or Android, or you can simply access it through the web, which is what we are going to do today. Sorry, I must have logged me out from earlier today. Oh, you know what? You just logged me into the wrong one. Do my Microsoft login. Sorry, guys. Okay, so here's what I want you to see. So again, if you haven't used Flipgrid before, you go in and you can create as many different grids as you want to. People use grids in a lot of different ways. You could use a grid for each class period, for each subject that you teach. You could use a grid for each student. Each student could have a grid. So when we're thinking about ELs and just wanting to give them an opportunity to practice speaking, you can just create a grid for them so that at the end of every day, maybe it's an exit ticket. At the end of every day, they go in and just tell you a little bit about what they learned in class. Lots of different ways you can set it up as a teacher. But I want to show you an example. So this is what one of the prompts look like that I've given to my students. Notice that here's my title, and then I've given a prompt. But notice this little button right here? That's the immersive reader. So again, if I have text in there, students can click, it'll open up the immersive reader, and you'll be able to make sure they really have access to that information. You can also, in addition to text, you can also record your own video. So if we had time, I'd play this video, but essentially in the video, I've just restated the prompt I have in text form. So I'm just trying to make it accessible to all my students. And then what does it look like to actually record your own response? So once I have done that, and I'm in a teacher view, so it looks a little bit different for students, but when they're ready, they hit record response. And here's some new things that have happened. So if you haven't been to Flipgrid in a while, notice they've made some changes. So the first thing up here at the top, 1 minute and 30 seconds, that's the length that I, as the teacher, has set for the recording. And then the next thing is show topic. So maybe I've forgotten.
I want to hear from you.
Oops. Maybe I've forgotten what the topic was from a minute ago when I just read it. Kind of like Sandy said, we get the instructions and then we do something else and we've forgotten what we're supposed to do. So here's the topic again, my video, and also the text. And then also they have these great sticky notes. So thinking back to what Sandy said, maybe they just want to write down a few words to help them remember what they want to say. And these sticky notes are not visible in the video. They're just there for the student as they're recording, as just a way to help them out. So sticky notes are a great thing to help as your students are thinking through what they want to say. Let's look at the effects real quick. So this is where it gets a little bit fun for the kids, okay? And this is what makes it a little non-threatening for the students. Helps them just to feel like they're having fun and not necessarily doing a assignment, okay? So again, when we're thinking about our students who are already feeling overwhelmed, maybe they're newcomers, they don't really want to talk at all, this just helps them take a little bit of the scariness out of the activity. So they can choose a filter if they want. They can do frames. They can add emojis to their pictures if they want to. There we go. Having a little bit of a delay here. So all kinds of things that they can do, okay? It's just, again, a way to have a little bit of engagement with your students. Now, these are new, okay? So if you haven't been to Flipgrid in a while, you may not know that these options exist. So one great thing they can do is they now have a whiteboard option. So they have a whiteboard, lots of different options that they have. And they can adjust the split screen. Okay, so they could do just a whiteboard if they wanted to, or they can do a little bit of a whiteboard or whatever the case may be. And then they have the drawing tools so they can actually draw on that whiteboard as they're talking to you. And then they can also upload a photo. So if they've been working on something else, this may be part of the project, they can upload a photo and that can be on the screen with them. Okay. And then of course they can type something as well. A few options that you have, you can upload your own video clip if you wanted to do that. They can mirror the image, they can mute themselves, and they can also record their screen. This is new. So maybe they're going to pull up something that they did in a Google Doc and they want that on the screen and then their voice just talking about it. Okay, so lots of different options that you have. But we're going to move on. You're going to hit record. And then from this point, they can talk, they can tell you what they know. If they need to pause it, they can pause it. When they're ready to start again, they hit record again. They can hit next. And then from this point, they can talk, they can tell. That's where you can edit it so they can trim it. If something crazy happened, they can delete part of it. They have a lot of control there. And then here they can take a selfie. They can upload a photo of themselves. They can add a name tag. However they want to submit their work. All right, and then they hit submit and it sends it to you as the teacher. Okay, you as the teacher have a ton of controls. You can make it to where students can see each other's posts. You can make it to where the posts are completely private. But again, just a really fun way, an engaging way, and a non-threatening way to get them to use those language skills and help them express what they do know, because a lot of times they know a lot more maybe than they're able to tell us. All right. Another option is Adobe Spark. So Adobe Spark, again, is a free service. Now with this, if your students use it, your students do have to sign up for an account. Okay, they just need an email address and they set up a password, but they do have to create an account. But again, it is free. There are some premium charges, like if you want to take the Adobe Spark watermark off of it, you can pay for a service. But you know what? They can put the Adobe Spark watermark on there, and I'm totally fine with that. What I want to show you how to do is how to create an easy video. So we're going to go down here for a video. I hit the blue plus sign right there, and I'm going to choose video. So just really quickly, this is one thing I like about Adobe Spark. So kind of think PowerPoint meets Movie Maker. All right. So they're creating slides, and then they can add their own voice narration. So they can use these templates, or we can just start from scratch for today. From scratch. And the great thing about Adobe Spark is it really is so easy to use. They can watch this 1 minute video and they'll know everything they need to know, and they'll be ready to go. They'll be ready to use it. We don't have a ton of time for me to talk about it, but I do just want to show you. So this is an example. Again, remember I said it was kind of like a slide. So this is their slide. From here, they can add a video, they can add text, they can add photos, they can add icons. But here's the power, I think, for our EL students, and really for any of our students, is they have the ability to record their voice. So they have 30 seconds for each slide. So I can tell you information about a topic or about an image that I've put up or whatever the case may be. And then I go to the next slide. And let's say, well, let me insert another blank slide. Let's say real quick that I want to put up a photo. And I want to do ice cream. Okay. And then I could tell you a little bit more about ice cream. Maybe we've been learning about how they make it, the science behind it. I don't know, whatever the case may be. And then down here, you can preview it. So I want you guys to just kind of see what it looks like. So they have 30 seconds for each slide. So I can tell you information about a topic or about an image that I've put up or whatever. And then I can tell you a little bit more about ice cream. Maybe we've been learning about how they make it, the science. All right, and that's our video. And then they can very easily download it. They can share it. It's a shareable link that they could share with you or post in your LMS or whatever the case may be. Again, just thinking about different ways that we can allow our students to be able to respond to our documents or to the assignments that you've given them. All right, real quick, the last thing I'm going to share with you before I hand it back to Sandy is some translation tools. And I really want to focus on Google Translate. Again, I'm pretty sure you guys are a Google district, and many of you have probably used Google Translate online before. But what you may not know is that the Google Translate app, so like for your phone or for your tablet, actually has a lot more options for you to utilize. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to try to share my iPad screen. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to pull up the Google Translate app. And there's a couple things that I want to show you that you can do. So notice at the very top, I've got Google Translate in that blue bar. And then immediately below that, that's where you can see the original language and what you want it translated into. So I'm going from English to Arabic. Now, down below it, I can simply type in text. That's going to do exactly what you can do at the Google Translate online, okay? The real features I want to talk to you about are those little icons below that. So I have a camera, I have a handwriting tool, I have conversation, and I have voice. So let's, I'm going to show you conversation real quick. Now, conversation didn't work this morning when we were doing it. I think because in order to not have feedback in Teams, it has blocked the microphone on my iPad, so you can't really see what's happening. But I just wanted to show you. Notice at the bottom, there's English and there's Arabic. So if I want to speak in English, I hold down the microphone for English. I speak into it. And what would happen is up here on my screen, it would translate it into Arabic. And then if I'm having a conversation, the person can hold down the Arabic microphone. They can speak in Arabic, and it will translate it to English for me. So a really great tool for especially those newcomers who don't know much English, or maybe when you're even talking with parents. That conversation tool can be really, really handy. Again, great because it's on your phone, so you can kind of have that conversation if you need to. The other really cool thing I want to show you is the camera feature. So I'm going to turn on camera, and then I'm going to hover it over this part, this reading passage in this textbook. You guys see that? So it's going from English, and it's putting the Arabic right on top of it. Now that can be a little crazy. So the other option, notice at the bottom, instant is in blue. If you go to scan, I can actually take a picture of it. It will scan that page. Now think about this. Like I can be using this in my textbook. I can be using this for like a parent letter. I can be using this for a page out of a novel that we're reading, like whatever the case may be. So notice here that at the bottom, I can select all, so I can translate everything, or I can use my finger and I can just highlight the portion that I want to translate. So maybe I just want these first two paragraphs. Okay, and then notice at the top, in white, there's the words in English. In blue, that's the words in Arabic. And if I hit that arrow, it takes me back into the app, and it has that text written out for me. And look, it has that little the little audio. It will speak it.
قبل ولادة شقيقها لم يكن لدى بلو كلاود سوى دمية.
I don't know if y'all could hear that very well, but it will speak it for you. And then notice right here at the bottom, whoops, there's a share button. So I can copy this or I can share it. And if I had my iPad linked to my Google Drive, I could share it directly into like a Google Doc. I can share it directly into Google Classroom and just make it available in that way for my students or my parents, whatever the case may be. Okay. One last thing I want to share with you. Let me stop this broadcast here and get back to the PowerPoint. There we go. One more thing I want to share with you real quick before I hand it back over to Sandy. I have put together a I've put together a Wakelet that has all of the resources that we've talked about today, in addition to a lot of resources that Sandy has on the EL webpage. So if you follow this link, or if you scan that QR code, it's going to take you to a Wakelet, and you'll have all of these things that I've showed you, all these things we've talked about. So I hope that is a really great resource for you. All right, Sandy, back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. That was fantastic. And yes, so that link is also in the chat. Okay, so now I'm just going to follow up real quickly with accommodations and modifications. They really can make a significant difference in supporting our English students and helping them to demonstrate what they know. So just to clarify, accommodations don't change the actual content that's being delivered. These are tools that we use to help students demonstrate what they know without lessening their expectations. Modifications, however, those are different, and those are changes made to the core content so that the learning objectives are actually different and more accessible for the student. So keep in mind that all state testing accommodations are considered classroom accommodations, but not all classroom accommodations are considered state testing accommodations. So that's really important for two reasons. One is that they're different. And on the Student's Language Service Plan, you'll see a section that has state testing accommodations, and then on the next page, you see classroom accommodations. And so there are things, common ones that are used for English learners on state testing accommodations are things like extended time, the use of a word-to-word glossary, and all that is a word, the word in English, and then the word in their language. No definition, nothing else. That's all it is. Or also they could, their other accommodation commonly used is in a smaller classroom. So with the teacher they know. So those are things that we really need to know about if they're on that language service plan, because they need to, if they're on the language service plan for the state test, they need to be done in the classroom for two reasons. One is if we're not allowing them to use an accommodation that can support their understanding on the state test, if we're not allowing them to use that in our classroom, it's not going to do them any good if they have the opportunity to do that on the state test. If they're allowed extended time on the state test, but we've never given them extended time in the classroom, then they're not going to take advantage of it, and they're going to be used to having to work at that same faster speed. So we want to make sure that we use that for them. And also, if we're not using those accommodations in the classroom, we're really not allowed to use them on the state test only. So we need to be very aware of what's on that language service plan. Now, let's go to the next slide, please. So here's just a list of some different classroom accommodations. Keep in mind, these are classroom accommodations. So alternate responses. So for example, if you're giving an assessment and everybody's going to write out a one-sentence answer in response to a question. Well, for your English learners, you might provide multiple choice in sentence form for the same question instead of having them write it out. Or you might provide a sentence frame to get them started on how to write that out. Providing advanced notes, that just helps the students get the gist of what your lesson is about without having to worry about every single word. Your advanced notes give them the important information so they can really focus on the important things that you're saying during the lesson. Extended time, of course, that's a state testing accommodation. So you want to make sure that if they need it and it's going to benefit them, let's let them use it. That remember, they're thinking in two languages, and we already talked about the additional time and steps that takes for English learners. So let's give them that time. Now, teacher modeling, those are things that are really beneficial to English learners. So I'm really just, let me think about, so for example, if I'm teaching narrative writing in my classroom, I'm going to start off with showing them a completed model, something that I have completed. Then I'm going to put that on my whiteboard. We're going to talk about it. We're going to notate on it. We're going to tell, oh, maybe I'm going to use different colors for different things. Red is my topic sentence. Maybe pink are supporting details. And when I sum it all up and bring it all back together, maybe I'm using green and I'm labeling that and marking that. I can do that on my whiteboard. My students can have a copy with them and they can do the same kind of notation on their copy. And then guess what I can do with it also? I can print that and I can provide that for those students who maybe struggle to keep up with notes. I know I had a student who I was teaching 6th grade at the time, and he would have an absolute meltdown if he couldn't keep up with the notes. So once I learned that about him and got to know him better, and I said to him, okay, here's what we're going to do. Every time we take notes, you do your best to keep up, but I'll print those notes for you afterwards so you can fill in and have both notes. So he was good with that, so we didn't have any more meltdowns with that. And then that ended up helping me because actually that year I had a student who was a gifted student. She was also very high academically, but she got strep throat 3 times that year and was out of class for a week every time. I had those notes available. I could print them and give it to her. She and I could have a quick meet and she'd be like, okay, I got it, Miss Elliott. So it was so much less stressful for me because I saved that and provided that to her. Also simplified written and verbal directions. That's just going to help them, to cut out the clutter and to know this is what I need to work on. Now I know that we all do this. We write our assessments to model what the students are going to see on state assessments or on benchmark assessments, because we want them to be able to do well on those assessments as well. So what I would do is, like, say I was given a math test, I would, give the same test to everybody. And then for my English learners, and I also did this for my students with special education needs or dyslexia. So I would go around with them and I would highlight the important words in the questions so that they would know. They could tell me, oh, that's a greatest common factor question, because I'd highlighted the important words in the directions and in the questions. Now, my goal was that as the year went on, I was trying to get them to be more independent, and they would eventually do the highlighting and I would check it. Some kids, depending on their level of language acquisition, English language acquisition, some kids by the end of the year would say to me, or even the middle of the year would say to me, Miss Elliott, I'm good. You don't need to highlight for me and you don't need to check mine. And I knew they were fine. They understood it. So that's our goal. Now, just keep in mind, not every student is going to get there by the end of the year because it depends on how long they've been here. It depends on a lot of different factors, but that's just a simple way to still provide the rigor, but help support them and scaffold that. Frequent breaks, I'm going to tell you, it is absolutely exhausting. Any of you who have ever visited a foreign country where you don't know the language, you are working all day long to understand what's going on around you. And that's exhausting work. And that's what our EL students are doing. So we want to give them as many little brain breaks as we can. And also use the use of dictionaries and glossaries. So for your high school students who already know how to use these tools, this is fantastic. If they have that on their language service plan, find out what glossary they are using for the assessment so that they can get you a copy of that for your students, because you want them to be able to use the same kind of book so that they're very familiar with it. Okay, then on the next slide, modifications. Remember, those are implemented when they're written on a language service plan or an IEP, and they do actually change the content or the learning objectives. So really, we should try as many accommodations as possible. We can maintain instruction for the standard or the skill. So maybe we're teaching about theme, but we might need to modify the reading level as needed. We might be able to use some tools such as Immersive Reader that Melissa told us about to help support them as they learn that. But some kids, we know their reading level is not nearly as high as it needs to be. So we really need to think about how can we modify that reading level but still teach the standard. Okay, then on the next slide, just a reminder that whatever we do, for accommodations or modifications, we need to document. I know that many of us, when I would get kids in the 6th grade, I could easily run down the hall and ask the teacher that he had last year, what were you doing to help support this kid? Tell me some of the things that you did that worked. And that was great. But sometimes teachers move. And sometimes, honestly, I would forget. Oh, yeah, I did forget. I used to do that with that student. So those are things, if we document those on the language service plan, which, by the way, that's a living document. It's not set in stone at the beginning of the year. We write it at the beginning of the year, but we are revisiting that 4 times throughout the year. And if you've got something that you say, hey, you know what? He doesn't really need this word-to-word glossary, but I found that him having a peer buddy, that's something that really benefits him. Make sure we're making those adjustments to the language service plan so we know what's working. Okay, on the next slide, I have an example. So in this slide, I'm going to ask you, after I do these 2 examples, I want you to tell me whether what we're doing is an accommodation or a modification by writing that in the chat, okay? So I have to tell you that these were 2 EL students. Their language acquisition levels are very different. This student, I think, actually may have already been in monitor status. But the assignment was that they had 10 minutes to complete it. It was an exit slip, and they had to give a summary of a chapter from the book, The Great Fire by Jim Murphy. So this student wrote, I'll read it because it's a little bit difficult to see her writing in some places. The fire was spreading really fast, causing William Brown to pull the alarm twice, but once again, he struck the wrong box. Luckily, when the firefighters drove towards the wrong location, they saw the glow of the fire and drove towards it. Alexander Freer was going to visit his stepsister when he saw the fire. When he tried to help her, a man yelled, "Across the river," meaning that the fire was on both sides of the river. So she did pretty well there. I mean, she didn't need my help at all. She has a few minor errors that could be due to the fact that they had 10 minutes to get this done. So she didn't need my help. So let's go ahead and look at the next student sample. Same assignment. And this student, I remember that day, he had on a little red sweatshirt, and he decided he crossed his arms and he just kind of sat back, and everybody else was furiously writing away. So I walked over to him and I scribed for him. And he said, well, in Chicago, there was a fire. The people were running because the buildings were on fire. Now, he told me some other things, and I already had a rubric in my head about what things needed to be included. So, tell me in the chat, remember, this is a comprehension assessment. Tell me in the chat if you think what I did with these 2 students was an accommodation or a modification. So for the ones that are on the chat, I see you're all in agreement that this is a modification. However, I want you to rethink. Remember, all of this, both students had to do the same thing. They had to give me a summary of the chapter. Did they both give me a summary of the chapter? Yes. Did they do it in a different way? Yes. This was an accommodation because they still had to give me a summary of the chapter. I was trying to determine reading comprehension here. Now, if this had been a writing assignment, absolutely this would have been a modification. So it depends on what your objective is on whether or not something is an accommodation or a modification. So definitely this was an accommodation because of what the goal was. I was trying to determine their reading comprehension, and I did learn that. I learned that she really didn't need any support at all. She got the gist of the chapter for sure. He needed a lot more support, and that was going to drive my instruction as to where I needed to give him more support to help him understand better. Okay, so I know it's a little tricky, so we're not going to do these, but these accommodations and modifications that are on the next few slides, I'm going to let you, when you'll get the slide deck and you'll get a copy of this recording so that you can refer back to it and you can check them and see if you can get that. And then on the last two slides, so we have this, go back to the previous one. So this is our contact information. So Melissa and I are both on here, and we really, really mean this when we say this. If you need anything from us, you have questions, any support that we can provide for you, please, please, please reach out to us. We're happy to help you in any way. And then on the next slide, those are our English learner contacts. So we have some of us, Leanne and I are from the Office of Elementary Education and Reading, and Sharon's from Student Assessment, and then Melissa Levy Jackson and Brenche Roby Fletcher are from the Office of Federal Programs. So really, please reach out to us. We're happy to help you in any way. We hope that this has been helpful for you today, and we thank you for joining us. If there are any questions, we'll be happy to stay on for a few minutes and answer, but we want to be respectful of your time and let you go if you need to go. Thank you. I'm glad you found it also helpful. Melissa, we're getting a lot of thank yous, and a lot are saying that they enjoyed the presentation.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today. And again, if we can help in any way, just reach out to us. Love the chat. Thank you guys so much. Y'all are awesome.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay.
And Melissa, I believe